Good afternoon and welcome to episode 9 of North Country Politics. I'm glad you could join us today. I'm Representative Mike Willett from Colebrook, and this is Representative Arnold Davis from Milan, our prodigal son, returning to have join us today in our podcast.
Well, it's nice to be back, Mike. And by the way, I saw the episode last week. Very, very good. Very informative. Mark Brady does a good job, and the two of you, I'm worried about losing my job now.
Well, it's an exciting project, and I think it's going to be a great thing for the North Country.
Yeah. All right. I've got something I would like to start. Well, I want to talk about a bill that has to do with timber grading, and it has to do with bringing value back to New Hampshire lumber. But before we get into that, I got a call last night. First, I got a text asking if it was too late to call or if I was busy, from Representative Diane Powers. And she's the chair of Municipal and County. And last term, she was very helpful in helping us get House Bill 123, which was the carbon sequestration bill, through. I went through her committee. She's the chair. She was phenomenal. And actually, I learned a lot working with her. So she calls last night and asked me, she said she was going through some Senate bills that are coming to her committee, and she noticed that one of our Senate bills had been amended. And at first I thought, oh my God, no, what was it? And she explained it to me, and I said, yeah, it was. It was done in committee. Senator Waters had a question about something, and it makes the bill a little better. So I did know about that. But I just thought it was really nice that with everything that's going on, we've got people in the House that are getting removed from committees, people in the Senate, and there's so much turmoil going on. I found it very nice and refreshing that a fellow representative looks out and has our back like that, to make sure that we're aware of what's going on. There was no foul play going behind the scenes. I just really, if Diane, if you watch these podcasts, I really want to thank you for that. That was, it brought hope to my fellow representatives, that see somebody's looking out like that for us. And just another shout out to her husband, Eric, is very much involved. He's not a state rep, but I don't know if he's a selectman, but I see him at testifying on bills all the time. He's got a little newsletter or an email that he sends out, I'm not sure, but very, very good couple. The only thing missing on them are capes.
I agree with you, and it's something that really surprised me when I got to Concord. You know, both party leaderships, they really put a lot of pressure on you to follow their lead and follow their agenda. And their agenda doesn't always match with our local constituents and what they need. Yeah. And when you vote against their agenda, you're ostracized, and that's on both sides of the aisle. It's not just one.
Yeah.
And it's good to see people like Diane who will look out for what's right.
That's right, yeah.
And stand up. And she's one of the good ones down there that has a little bit of common sense and wants to do the right thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, a bill I've got coming up this week in the Fish and Game Committee is kind of an interesting bill. It's Senate Bill 505, and what it's going to do, it's going to get rid of the temporary OHRV registrations in New Hampshire. And I wasn't sure about it, so we had it in our 1188 commission, and I talked to Captain Eastman about it. And what it was, when the OHRV business blew up in New Hampshire about 10 years ago, they had their regular registration, but they also had a 3-day temporary registration. And they put on a 3-year program as a pilot program. Well, it's 10 years later, and it's still on a 3-year pilot program.
Yeah.
And so what we decided to do is, most people, where you travel, if you go to Vermont or you go to West Virginia or you go to Tennessee, you pay a full year's registration. There's no temporary registration. It is what it is. And Maine still has a temporary registration, but it's $100, which is more than our standard registration.
Right.
So they're putting a piece of legislation to get rid of that bill. And what it'll do, they did about 3,000 temporary registrations last year. But by getting rid of this temporary registration, it'll bring about $365,000 back into the OHRV business for trails, clubs, law enforcement, all that stuff. And it is a direct benefit into trails alone of about $80,000 of direct money into trails.
Nice.
So it's something I'm going to support, and I'm looking forward to having it come through my committee this week.
Good, yeah. So I've got we talked about the carbon bill a couple of episodes ago. There's another bill, it has to do with timber grading. And a lot of people aren't familiar with this. It's kind of a complicated system. But we grade there's two types of softwood grading, SPF or SPFS. SPF, it stands for spruce, pine, and fir, and spruce, pine, fir south, which actually means south of the border, the Canadian border. So the Canadian-U.S. border is a political boundary that separates these two grading designations. Anything above the Canadian line is SPF, anything below it is SPFS. So they claim that SPF is stronger, and it maybe, but the way they do the grading, I don't believe it is. So what they do is they take all the species that they have in their area, and they test them all. They actually put the lumber in a machine, and they test it to failure, and then that creates a number that they use. So Canada has a lot of black spruce, and it's slow growing, it's dense, and it is very strong. So that gets put into their average, but it grows mostly in northern Quebec. It doesn't grow in southern Quebec, very, very little, and very little in the U.S. So that gives them an unfair advantage. Now we have Norway spruce, which is quite a bit weaker. That's put into our average, and it brings our grading down. So two things they don't say is they have Norway spruce too that gets thrown into the mix, but a lot of it they have a special grade just for Norway spruce to keep it out of their average. So that's designated separate, although a lot of times it gets mixed in with the other lumber. And what they don't tell you about the black spruce, where it's very dense, grows so slow, they harvested it when it's very small, so they make 2x4s, 2x3s out of it. Now that's not structural lumber. It has no business being in that average mix to give them a false high number.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, if a piece of spruce is grown in Pittsburgh, and right across the border in East Hereford or Shortsville, they're growing a piece of spruce, the Canadian spruce brings more money than the U.S. spruce?
Yep. If I stand with 1 foot in Canada and 1 foot in Pittsburgh, New Hampshire, and I look at 10 yards to my left, I see a red spruce, 10 yards to my right, I see one. You can't tell me one of those is stronger than the other just because of that political border. Now, in our bill, what we're looking for is to change it from the Canadian border to bring some science into it and bring some logic into it, maybe the 44th parallel. I think the whole state of New Hampshire, the growing climate, the soil, all the growing parameters, they're all similar to southern Quebec, and it's grown in the same climate. So how is there a difference?
And that's what's kind of a little bit crazy because, I've traveled a lot through Maine and I see a lot of spruce coming off the Golden Road and coming off, the Jackman and going through Eustis into Daquam, some huge softwood mills there. And the same thing going right up by my house on Route 3 into Quebec, some spruce logs. You're going to tell me that they're going to mill them and sell them at a lower price?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
So they claim that the growing conditions are, the northern growing conditions are slower growing, makes a denser wood. Well, you look into Maine, into Aroostook County, that's higher than Montreal. And you look at northern New Hampshire and Vermont, go to our west in the Michigan area. We're higher than a lot of parts of Canada there. So it's Canada beat us to the punch getting the grading. And before 1991, this wasn't an issue. This is something that's evolved recently in the last 2 or 3 decades. So this bill, we can't change a national grading designation. That's beyond as state legislators, that's beyond our reach. But what this bill does, it makes it so engineers and architects in New Hampshire, when they are speccing out a job, they have to have they have to include SPF and SPFS as the same designation. Now, if they need two different sets of plans with AI, that's not a big deal anymore.
No.
And so it gives fairness to New Hampshire, and we're hoping that Maine and Vermont and some other New York jump on board with us. Once we've gotten this through the House, we've gotten it through the Senate. It's on its way to the governor, and she said she'll sign it. So it's pretty exciting. This is going to it's already got people talking.
Well, and what's the best part about it? The bottom line, and it can be a little convoluted when we talk about SPF and SPFS and stuff. Bottom line is it's going to give more value to New Hampshire lumber and New Hampshire timber.
That's right. And it'll have New Hampshire homes built for New Hampshire families with New Hampshire timber.
Yep.
And that's, I'm very excited we were able to get this through. There was a lot of hoops to jump through, but this probably one of the more important things for the timber industry that we'll do in the House.
It's a win-win-win all around.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something that's going on in the North Country right now that we're working very hard on, and it's going to be a long process because it's going to take both state and federal help to get it done, is part of the emergency communications throughout the North Country. And they've done a tremendous job upgrading a lot of their equipment and putting up towers and repeaters so we have the safety people can talk to each other all over the place. But we've got a couple issues. You take the 13 northernmost miles of Route 3 in Pittsburgh, there's no electricity, so it's almost impossible to put a tower up there, even though there are still a lot of logging roads and snowmobile trails and hikers and people up in that area. And then the second part that's really kind of difficult is what they call Line A. So we have, like in Hall Stream in Pittsburgh, we have a nice new repeater and has long signal, but we can only put it at 40% power because the signal travels into Canada, and by treaty we can't do that. So we have big areas to cover, but we have to keep our antenna power and our radio power toned down. So we're working with the FCC and Washington, and the New Hampshire Republican leadership came up to Stewartstown, had a meeting with us and saying, what do we need to get this done? And, we're small towns, we're not very wealthy. Like in the town of Errol, their ambulance radio is 25 years old. And when they can't talk to the dispatch in Colebrook, you say, well, why? Well, we need to help.
Yep.
So that's something that we're really working hard on. And we've got a group up there saying, hey, let's get working with the FCC so we can increase our power, work with the Canadians, because out of our dispatch in Colebrook, we dispatch for 3 Canadian towns. That's part of our dispatch area.
Yeah.
We try to work together. So we're going to work with the FCC, get some more repeaters out there, get some power through that dead area so we can run some antennas, run some safety equipment and communications. And it's going to be a little bit of a long-term process, but I think it's going to be good. And it's really been amplified over the last few years with the amount of illegals we get crossing into the States.
Yeah.
And there's dead areas and they can't communicate. And I'm not saying, let me rephrase that. The biggest problem, there are some illegals coming through, and that's one story. But the big story is there's a lot of drugs coming through,
Yeah.
a tremendous amount of drugs.
Yeah.
And this is the big thing. We've got to stop it that way coming through one way or the other.
I was going to say that the governor had a task force where we had a lot of different agencies up there, and I believe that was very successful, and it stopped a lot of illegals from coming through our northern border. They went around through Vermont and Maine, but there were still some sneaking through. But once they get through, they're in such a wilderness area, they almost they're looking for help now.
Yeah.
But the drug issue is the big one, and I want to say I thought that was very nice for the majority leader Jason Osborne and I believe Ross Berry.
Yes.
Came up, and Zach Laterno, is that his name?
Yep.
That was really nice to see these guys come up. We don't get a lot of support north of the Notch, and they come up, and kudos to them.
And what's going to be exciting about it is it's given us 2 fronts to try to get this worked on, because Jason and Ross are national players. They know the people in Washington. They have connections there, and they're going to help us get through Washington. And on the same time, as state representatives and our Senator Dave Rochefort, we're working on the state side of it, that we're going to try to get some money into next year's budget. We have our new budget coming up next year, the biennium, to cover some of these costs because these are very important things for the North Country. So having this two-faceted attack between the two of them, we're hoping that we can complete our mission.
Well, and don't forget, we get a lot of support from Governor Kelly Ayotte.
100%.
And one of the councilors, Joe Kenny, he's very helpful in the North Country. Yeah, I actually tease him. I say he's one of us. He just doesn't know it.
Right. And it's nice to know that there's some people south of the Notches that know who we are and where we are and what we do.
Yeah.
Another thing coming up this week is the income tax debate again.
Oh, God.
And just to give you a little background, a few weeks ago, he was a former governor's councilman, Andrew Valinsky, a very, very smart guy. And he proposed a 3+3 tax. And what it was a 3% income tax and then a 3%, a $3 per thousand property tax statewide. And that would cover educational costs. And it was interesting because right after he announced it, the House Minority Leader, Alexis Simpson, came around and said, "We will never support an income tax." And as a Republican, and I was shocked to hear her say that.
Yeah.
I'm very happy, but I was shocked.
Yeah.
Then a week or so later, there was a bill come through the House. It was a
There was the next day?
a constitutional amendment saying that constitutional amendment, there'll never be an income tax in New Hampshire. And her whole party voted against the constitutional amendment.
Yeah.
And she put a statement out saying because they really hadn't had time to study it. I have no problem with that. I understand. So now it's coming to through the Senate, and there'll be some hearings on it, and it's going to be coming back.
And they've had time to study.
They've had time to see it. So I'm anxious to see what happens down the road.
Yeah. And it's very hard, as everybody knows, to get a constitutional amendment through because you need 3/5 of the majority, not of the people there, of the members of the House, which is 400 members.
240.
240, yeah.
Yeah. And the other part of it is that's real interesting is we all know that something's going to be done with school funding. We all know that, and we all want to make sure that our schools have everything that they need. But we go back and we talk about the income tax. The state of Connecticut always comes up. The state of Connecticut is a very prosperous state and a very wealthy state. They had high property taxes, and in the 70s they put in an income tax, a 3% income tax, to fund education. Well, here we are. We're 45 years later, and they have about almost a 7% income tax now, and they have
Where's the property tax?
some of the highest in the country.
Yeah.
And I think that's what everybody's fear is,
Yeah.
that additional funding without spending control, it's you got to have both sides of the equation.
I agree.
And I think we're going to see that, coming up again in the next week or so, is the bill for SAU consolidation. And I don't know what form it's going to be coming out this time because it's gone through some committees and it's being reworked.
No, is this a Senate bill?
I think it is. Yeah. I think it is. And what they were talking about is, having one SAU for each county,
Yeah.
Manchester having one of their own, and Nashua having one of their own because their school population is so high.
Yeah.
And just running some rough numbers, in Coas County with 3,000 students, with 5 SAUs, so you have 5 SAU chiefs, and you have 5 special ed, you have 5 business managers, and 5 superintendents. So what it ends up being is it'd be very easy to save $1 million without much trouble. And they said, well, Coas County's so big, it's spread out. It is, but Zoom and team meetings, and you can have meetings without having to travel.
That's right.
And I know our education. We need to get some money back in these schools. We need to get the kids back into these schools
That's
instead
right.
of getting
That's
them away
important,
from the
yeah.
schools. And somehow we've got to change the way we think and do things. We've got to think outside the box to make it a better experience, have better educated kids at a lower cost. And if anybody knows that magic bullet, let us
Boy,
know.
I'm interested in hearing what Katie Patnell has to say about making schools charter public schools, kind of combining them. I'm not saying I'm for it or against it. I'm interested in learning more about it.
And I'm the same way, but I think part of it is you talk to people, and the funding is different than a regular school, being a charter school, and it also changes some of the rules of what you have to do to some of the mandates.
Well, and it's more local control. Is that right?
That's the way I look at it. I know in Colebrook that we talked about a few weeks ago the Pinnacle Charter School, and again, they're looking, and it's not the typical charter school. They're looking for the kids that want to have the higher college education and get them prepared for college, and they're going to pull some kids out of our local schools, and there's no. I don't think there's a reason why our schools couldn't be doing the same.
Yeah, I agree.
So, is there anything else that you came across this
good.
week?
We had no session this week, and I was actually MIA, like you said. I was out of town, so I'm good.
And I was pretty happy. I only went to Concord twice this week instead of my usual 4 days, and got a chance to change oil in my truck and
There you
get
go.
things serviced and charge my batteries a little bit. So,
Hey, one thing I would like to say, the reps in the rest of the reps in Berlin, Lori Corzine, I see her. We're in different committees. I see her all the time down at Concord. She's working hard. Mark Trembley's actually in my committee. Pete Morency. I mean, I see all these guys down there, and I'm there a lot. I'm, like you say, 3-4 days a week sometimes, and it's kind of fun to see the COAS. They call us the COAS 9. And it's you got Sean Durkin and Seth King and Mike Murphy,
Jim Tierney.
Jim Turney. Am I missing someone?
I don't think so.
No, it's a really good group, and they're all hard workers. Our constituents are similar, so we're all on the same page.
And it's interesting because we work as a team, and we all vote for our constituents, but we try to vote as a block. And then we see people coming to us now, how are you guys in COAS voting? How are you
Yeah,
guys in COAS?
yeah.
Because we know it's an 18-vote swing now.
Yeah.
And we always don't vote alike.
No.
But we have a good open communication between us all, and we work very well together.
And we went from people in Concord calling us the COAS Mafia to the COAS 9. And it's kind of cool. It's we walk down as a group. It's almost like the shootout at the OK Corral. They kind of part the way and let us walk through.
But we're very lucky because we have some dedicated people, and we go over bills and we talk about what's best for the county and what's best for your communities.
Yeah.
And we see so many people out down there that are, how they ever get elected, I have no idea, because they're just there. They don't know what's going on. They're not, they're not looking for their constituents. They're just following what leadership says, or not doing anything, and don't show up half the time. So we're very, very lucky. We have a very dedicated group up here.
Well, and I would say, I dare say this, we, it's not like we neglect to listen to leadership, because if you check our voting records, we all have in the high 90s. Last time I checked mine, it was a 97% voting record. I think yours was the same. Everybody else was right around there or a little higher. And so that being said, if you have a 100% voting record, you're not working for your constituents.
No.
And I think a lot of our constituents up here, we do what they ask.
Yes.
And we work together as a team, like you said. If you have a problem, you call me, I call a couple other ones. We all go up and take care of the problem, or vice versa. And I don't think there's a lot of counties that do that.
I don't think there are any.
Right.
And over the last couple of years in the springtime, we brought a bunch of reps up into the North Country, into Berlin and stuff, to see how much our culture is different and the different issues and different problems we have. And I know, like, one of our biggest advocates is out of Portsmouth, and he says, "I didn't realize." And so when we talk to him about things, he says, "Yeah, I'm with you guys."
Yeah.
and we've made some friends by just trying to explain that, Whitefield isn't Wakefield,
That's right.
and the culture is different. It's a little different on the side of the Notches.
Yep. And just one last thing, Mike. We have a kind of an advocate down in the governor's office, John Callahan, and he's a very young man, but such a knowledgeable, helpful. I'll tell you, I'll call him often or see him in the hallways and pick his brain about a bill or about something that's happening. And I'll tell you, shout out to John. See somebody that young to have that position in the governor's office.
We're very lucky because when I call the governor's office, you call the governor's office, either we speak to the governor or their direct aides, and they get right back to us.
Yeah.
And we tell people, other reps in the House, that we talk directly to the governor, and they're like, they've been for 8 years, they never talked to the governor.
Yeah.
And, we've got our cell phone on speed dial, and she always takes our calls, and that's something that I think we're very lucky.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, that'll conclude our episode 9 of North Country Politics. Please feel free to contact us at any time, and watch our videos, our podcasts, share them, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.